My brother has been working with a doctor that's helped him out a great deal and wanted a surfboard for his surfing doctor. So this is a longboard design, custom made for him, and I will take you through the steps all the way from laminating the first pieces of wood through mounting and completion. Hope you enjoy this video. My first step in making this longboard trophy, you might call it, I took pieces of walnut and ripped them, two of them into about 1/8 inch and one of them into a 3/8 inch. Then I laminated them together with plenty of glue on both sides of each board, and it was all uneven. I should have shown you this, but then I ran it through this planer and took it down to a smooth surface on both sides. My next step is to make a pattern for a longboard on here, and I'll show you that. So if you look carefully, you can see right here I've sketched a nose on the board and then a tail on the board. I'm not sure if I'm real happy with that, but changes could be made later. Remember, I can always take my sander and grind a little bit more off and change the shape of the nose at the same time. The big issue is it's got to be symmetrical. The human eye loves symmetry. So how can I do that? When I have a rough sketch here, I've taped two pieces of paper together so I can get the length that I need. I'll take them then and I'll fold them exactly in the middle. And then what I'll do is lay it right down dead center and sketch half of the pattern. And after I sketch that half of the pattern, when I cut it, I can open it up and it's going to have perfect symmetry. So you can see here I have the pattern now. I'm pretty happy with it. I can do several things. One is I can put spray glue on here and glue this down. And that works well, except you have sometimes to sand off a lot of paper. So because I'm only concerned with the tail and the nose, I think I'm going to cut it off at the nose and at the tail and just tape it down. And I can cut right through the tape and that'll be an easier cleanup. As I put this down, I'm making very sure to make sure that crease goes right down the center. In fact, as I speak to you, I notice it isn't going right down the center. So I need to pull this up and readjust a teeny bit. So that's the critical thing. You got to have the darn thing centered. There, that looks good. So I'll center it. So you can see I'm about ready to start this cut. And the trick here is when you're cutting, stay outside of your project, okay? Just a little bit outside of that green paper, and then you can file or sand or whatever to get down to the exact line. That's the safe way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my vacuum, turn on the saw, and get cutting here. I'm going to do a bunch of lines perpendicular to these lines of wood. So when I do the shaping, I can kind of see on the edge if I'm keeping my symmetry down to where it should be. So you can see there's nothing special here. I'm just striking lines along the edge. Yeah, that's looking good. So what I'm going to attempt to do now is place this on a 90-degree bed right here, and I'm going to sweep it like this and sweep it in this direction and make a continuous smooth rounding, keeping in mind these perpendicular lines and trying to make sure on both sides that they are coming out like symmetrical. Then I'll spin it around and do the same thing on the back side. This is almost more of an art. It's like sculpting than woodworking, because you're using your eye a lot to get that balance. After that, the tougher thing to do is a surfboard has what's called rocker. And rocker is when this bottom part of the board comes up like this. It gets thinner at the nose and comes up, and the back side does the same thing, coming up like this. And what I'll be doing is putting a little silhouette here of the rocker that I want to carve into the board, and then attempt to do it here. That again is more like sculpting than it is basic woodworking. So let's give it a go. You can see here I just made a real rough line that's going to show you where I'm going to try to remove wood here and back here to make that appearance of the rocker, they call it, that almost all surfboards have. This is a little tricky because it's like sculpting, so let's take a look at it. You can see how those lines going across really help me in the shaping of this to keep it looking nice and balanced, and you can see how I'm beginning to get that rocker that I've been talking about. So I'll just do a little bit more. Now, there are several ways I can round these edges. I've done this every which way. One way is I can take a file and I can very carefully file with the grain using not this coarse but this medium grit part of the file. I've done that many times and it works well, although sometimes you can get a gouge in there. Another way is I can just go back and put it right on the belt and let the belt take it down, but that'll give you some flat spots. You have to be careful. I've had a lot of success with that though. Today I'm going to try using this thing. It's called a Japanese plane. Super sharp and kind of nice to use. It's kind of like, almost like a real surfboard shaper would use. And you can see the kind of scraps I'm getting off of there. So I'll just take my time and pull this around the edges. And probably I'll get a real nice rounding that I can then use some sanding on. In that little bit of time, look at the scrap I'm getting and look at the nice rounding I'm getting down that edge. I don't know if you can see that, but it's coming out pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that. You don't need to watch me do planing, and I'll come back to you when I get it closer to being finished. Well, I went after it with this palm sander, and you can see now it's starting to take shape. I've got that rocker in there. And little creases like this here that you see, that's hand sanding time to shape it up and get all of those things out of there. So it's coming along pretty good. I'm happy with the shape. And we'll see. Wait till you see me put the tung oil on there. It'll pop that color out like you wouldn't believe. So a lot has transpired since the last clip. I sanded this with 220 grit on my palm sander, and then I was fortunate that a guy near me has a laser printer, and I took him the text that I needed, this here, Dr. Perkin, you are the best, that's my brother's doctor, and he burned that in there. He just used a computer font and printed it right in there, and I was lucky. He just charged me $10 for that. Now my next problem is how to mount this, and I've been playing with different ideas. I think I'm going to put something like this, a plug, on the back side. I'll make it look better than that, obviously. And then I can drill holes in it. I'm really worried about penetrating this and ruining it. So I think I'll put something on the back side and drill into that. And I have two. So now I'm going to try to make the fin, we used to call them skags, underneath the board here. And so I'm just freehand drawing. I started to cut this already. I forgot I needed to show you how to do it. So I picked a piece that's too wide for the fin. It's about 3/8 inch wide piece of oak. And what I did before I got started is I drilled two 1/8 inch holes. And I'm planning to glue this dowel into each of these. And what I'll do is I'll cut it out, and it'll be nice and thick to have my holes drilled into. But then after I cut it out, I can go ahead and sand it down and make it thinner and thinner and get closer and closer to those holes. The challenge is going to be, it's easy for me to put a 1/8 inch hole in here and another one in here and glue it, but if you only have one dowel, you've got the problem of pivoting. So I'm going to try to put two in, although sometimes that is super hard to line up. I just eyeballed that. So if I don't have luck, I can always snip off one of the dowels, glue one in, and hope that if I put some good strong glue in there, it'll work. So I'm going to go over and do some bandsaw cutting on this now. So my plan now is to take this rough edge right here and put it against the belt like this, clean that up, and then I'll probably take it to the vise and get a rat tail file in there. And then notice the grain is going in this direction, so I will very carefully hold it against the belt and put more pressure on the outside of the fin out here each time, because I want to bring that cut in and I want to keep my holes in the center of the sanded surface. What I'm doing here, I mentioned this in another video, this is not a safe procedure. I have done this hundreds of times. I'm very, very careful. Do not do this unless you've spent probably 50 hours using this tool and you have a good idea of how things can get away from you. So now I'm going to try to put this down on my sandpaper on the workbench and sand all these little facets out and try to get some symmetry in there by hand. This is hard to do. It's more of an art than a woodworking skill. I'm reminded of Michelangelo. I can't compare myself to him, obviously, but I once heard when someone asked him, "How did you carve that statue of David?" And he said, "I looked at the block and I saw David, and then I just removed everything that wasn't David." Well, I wish I could do that. I can't. But that always amazed me when I heard that story. So I'll go ahead and sand this out, get it looking good. So here's my attempt at trying to find where I need to drill the two holes. I've spun this on my sanding belt. They made a sharp point. And then I'm going to take this wire cutter and snip it off about right there and squish it back to its original shape as best as I can get. And then I'm going to put both of these, I'm sorry you can't see this very well, but there we go, both of these into here. See how they're sharp points? And then when I set this down, I can make a dent and I'll know exactly where I need to drill. Hope this works. So check this out. I put a piece of blue tape on the drill bit so I can see that I'm going to go that depth. I also set the depth on my drill press so it will stop before penetrating my surfboard. And then I have it sitting on a little ramp here to try and get this surface as perpendicular to the drill bit as I can. Well, there it is. I took two-part epoxy, got it on a nail, put it on the little wood stubs, And this, when it's especially two-part epoxy and doweled in with two dowels, it's not going anywhere, so that's there to stay. So I'll just give it, it's a 5-minute dry, but I'll give it probably overnight before I mess with it again. So here's the completed project. The surfboard was a lot easier to do than the mounting. The mounting, I have a block down here, and if I spin it around, you can see that I cut a piece of hardwood and drilled a hole into it, but I had to have the correct angle to get that shot. And then I took and cut a 3/8 inch bolt and glued it with two-part glue into here and glued it up here, and this has been glued on there. So I also put a little bit of doweling behind this piece of wood to lock it in there when I glued it. So I think that's going to make a nice tribute for that doctor. Thank you for watching. 2 girls, 4